Coming to you from the Black Swan Media Studios, this is Fireside Chats, talking to the real difference makers in the world. Now, here is your host, John Crump.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Happy Saturday. Sorry it took so long to get on. I was having a little bit of technical difficulties. Got it all worked out now. And now we are in the mix. I am joined tonight, but before we get to that, let me say you can go to Black Swan Tactical and get this awesome Space Force shirt. And I also want to pitch you my Patreon. My Patreon is patreon.com/John Crump. The reason why I'm pushing that is when we raise $750, we're going to buy a single mom a brand new Glock. And not only that, we're going to get her the training to use it so she can get a concealed carry permit. Not sure who that single mom is yet, but we will find one once we hit that mark. I am joined tonight by a remarkable gentleman. He was born in Cuba, lived under communism in Cuba before coming to the United States as a refugee. He became a world-renowned neurosurgeon. He took on the CDC and their anti-gun bias. I am joined by the esteemed Dr. Miguel Faria. How you doing, Miguel?
I am doing very well, thank you, and thank you very much for inviting me to be here.
Yeah, it's great. I wanted to have you on because a couple of different things that I really like to pitch to people is American freedom and guns. And you seem to be right at the intersection of that. I'm going to jump right into it now. We are live on Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, a couple different YouTube channels. We are all over the place. But the thing I wanted to jump into right away is your book. You have a book called, this is not your book that's coming out, but another book that is already out and is available on Amazon. If you're watching this on my YouTube page, my new YouTube page, not my old one, the link's in the description. It's called Cuban Revolution. Put that over there.
Yes, the subtitle is Escape from a Lost Paradise, and it relates, there are several stories there. One is how I escaped with my father and from communist Cuba. And then there is also a lesson about what can happen to a country when the citizens lose the right to keep and bear arms, which is the reason that Cuba remains a communist state right 90 miles from Florida. While the Soviet Union has collapsed, the satellites in Europe are gone, the communist satellites, and yet we have a communist island where the people are slaves to a dictatorship for many, many years, and it still remains a communist country. And the main reason is because the people were disarmed and were not the poor peasants who tried to fight Fidel Castro were annihilated because they didn't have enough arms to fight the state. And that is also related in my book. In a more personal note, I also relate how my own father, who had been in the revolution, in fact, my family was in the underground under a group called the Student Revolutionary Directorate that fought Fulgencio Batista, the former dictator. And yet, after the revolution, the communists came over our home and tried to take his gun away. And in fact, they took our guns away. But my father went back, and I'll leave that story for the people who read the book. The main thing is that I am very horrified by what is happening in this country. And if we lose the election, when I say we, I mean the conservatives, the Republicans, if we lose the election in 2020, I think we have a major problem. Because what happened in Cuba via revolution, namely the formation of a tyrannical government where the people are disarmed, I think will happen here in the United States.
There's no doubt in my mind that it will. One of the interesting parts about your book is your parents fought against Batista. A lot of people think that it was only the communists that fought against Batista, but there was the group that your parents were a part of that was fighting against Batista. But what they wanted to see is the free elections in Cuba and the Cuban Constitution restored, something that Batista took away.
Yes, there were two major groups. Each one was named after a date in the revolutionary history of Cuba. The Fidel Castro's group was called the 26th of July movement, and very soon after the formation of that group, they were infiltrated by communists. Somehow, they were the group that attracted the American media, so that even journalists went to Cuba and portray Fidel Castro and his group as a man who was the George Washington of the Caribbean, and who wanted to free the people. He got all the coverage, whereas even though they were infiltrated by communists, including his own brother Raúl Castro, who is still the power behind the throne in Cuba, and Che Guevara. In fact, I met as a child, I met both Fidel Castro and Che Guevara.
Oh, you did?
Because we were a very revolutionary family, except we belonged to the Student Revolutionary Directorate.
Which are steadfastly anti-communist.
Exactly. It was an anti-communist group and was made initially by students from the University of Havana and then by many professionals. But they were very rigidly anti-communist. And this group was ignored by the American media, and somehow Fidel Castro, after the overthrow of Batista, prevailed. And one of the most famous speeches he gave, he ended up with a white dove settled on his shoulder, which I'm sure was very well orchestrated. And because our group, the group that my parents belonged to, refused to disarm. He said, "Why do you want weapons? Armas para qué? Firearms for what? For against the people of Cuba who have put me in power?" And because of his charisma and the media coverage in the island and American media and the State Department of the United States supporting him, he prevailed. And eventually, that led to communism. The group that my parents belonged to, the Student Revolutionary Directorate, were for the most part exterminated. And they led the peasants who led a rebellion in the Escambray Mountains near my hometown. And they fought Fidel Castro from 1959 to 1965, when they were all finally exterminated. Raúl Castro himself admitted that more people died during that rebellion than were killed during the revolution against Batista. At that point in time, my father knew that he was under surveillance. They were trying to entrap him, and we finally escaped. And we came to this country, and I'm doing what I can to prevent what happened to Cuba that doesn't happen to this country.
Yeah, your dad was a doctor as well, and that basically meant there was no chance of him being allowed to leave Cuba.
That's exactly right. There was no way for him to apply legally. In fact, most people in Cuba are incarcerated in that island. There is no freedom of movement. And our only choice was escape. But we had to escape because they were very close to having my father arrested. In fact, I had several family members who were arrested because they were charged with assisting the rebels, which were called the Alzados in the Escambray Mountains, where the communists lost thousands of troops fighting peasants and farmers who were very poorly armed, but that was the determination of the Cuban people. Once the outsiders were eradicated, killed, the communist state was completely consolidated, and my father realized we had to escape.
Yeah, I mean, that is interesting. Che, who's seen as this hero, would execute kids as young as 10 years old because he thought they would become. And why do you think that he's seen as a hero to many people on the left?
Well, number one, he came from Argentina. He wasn't even Cuban. And he was a good-looking guy, and he gave brilliant speeches. He was very sincere. He believed that communism could create the new man. In other words, that human nature could be transformed by the will of the state. And he really believed this thing. And yet, his military campaigns were not that great. It was really Fidel Castro who really led the military aspect of the revolution.
Yeah, that's why they sent him to Africa, because he was screwing so much up.
Well, what happened was he went to Bolivia and tried to start a revolution there. He wrote a book about guerrilla warfare. He violated every one of his own tenets. He even contradicted Mao on how a guerrilla war should be conducted. Mao Zedong said that you should convert the people first, that you should be able to swim like a fish in the water. Che Guevara said, no, you don't have to do that. You can, by the pure will, you can start a revolution. We're going to completely turn South America into a communist continent. And he went unprepared and led this very disruptive and very poorly organized campaign and was killed. And when he was killed, the Bolivian government made the mistake of taking pictures of him, laying down, and he really looked like Jesus, and being a good-looking guy, and then had this religious aura around him. The picture became a sensation. And given the fact that he had also had other pictures that in which he looked like the icon of guerrilla warfare, it just, in the mind of the people, they forgot the bad things that he had done. For example, he and Raúl both were the executioners for Fidel Castro. They dug trenches in which they lined up enemies of the people, enemies of the state, supposedly Batistianos, the people from the previous regime. But in actuality, there were people who had actually fought against Batista who belonged to the Revolutionary Directorate.
Yeah, there was...
And they were shot and thrown into ditches. And in fact, he was in Havana, in one of these fortresses, smoking his cigar and conversing with Ernest Hemingway, and they were both witnessing the fighting squads while drinking mojitos, a rum drink, and smoking cigars. And all of this was carried out by this man, whoever the young people believe that he is just the greatest philosopher, statesman that ever lived. And he was a criminal, really. He believed in what he was doing, but still he was wrong.
Yeah,
and he killed many people.
He was a mass murderer, and what is always interesting to me is, like, there'll be like people wearing like Che shirts, like especially gay people wearing Che shirts, and Che was a massive homophobe, and he would kill people for just being gay.
Oh, there was one of the major poets in Cuba was a homosexual, and he walked into this person's library and saw his book, and he grabbed the book and threw it on the fireplace, He said, "Don't you know that this guy's a homosexual?" And yet people just ignore this. You're talking about the T-shirt. There is another interesting story. Carlos Santana, you know who he is, a great musician,
Oh, yeah.
Guitar player. He was sitting on a cafe in California, and there was people passing around, and this one guy passed with a T-shirt of Che, and there was a Cuban American who said, "Why are you wearing this shirt? Don't you know this man is a war criminal?" And Carlos Santana got up and said, "Hey man, why are you telling me this? I don't care about the truth. I want to keep the image of the man. I don't care what he done. Okay, let me keep my thoughts and let the man go." And that's the way some liberals are. They deny reason and truth, and they go by passion and their ideology. They want to preserve Che as a great hero, even though I mentioned some of this in my book about some of the misadventures of Che Guevara in the Congo and other places.
Yeah, he was an idiot when he went to Bolivia. What he did is he went to where his support wasn't, which was ridiculous.
Exactly. The peasants that he was supposed to foment a revolution with had nothing to do with him. In fact, it was the peasants, the Indians, who betrayed him, who kept the government aware and informed where the Che Guevara was and where his guerrilla group was camping and so forth, until he was finally, surrounded and wounded. And amazingly, most of his group was annihilated, and yet he lived until he was executed a few hours later.
Yeah, the CIA wanted him alive. I was reading in a book by Annie Jacobs called Surprise, Kill, Vanish. Really good book about the history of the CIA and black ops and stuff like that. And the CIA wanted him alive so bad, but the Bolivians hated him so much that they chose to execute him.
In fact, the person who captured him from the CIA, who followed him with the Bolivian army, is from my own state, from my own city of Sancti Spiritus. Felix Rodriguez. He's still a hero in Miami. And yes, you're correct. He was the president of Venezuela, Bolivia, who ordered his execution.
Yeah, I was watching
because the Bolivians hated him.
I was watching an interview with Felix Rodriguez because I've read a lot about Cuba. Because it's like something it's a form of government that I'm totally against, and it's yet so close to my beloved country. And he was talking about how like he wanted to take Che alive, but the Bolivians hated him for what he did to their country, that they decided he's going to be punished for his crimes. And so he basically said, too bad. But
yeah, it was a disastrous mission that he undertook. He did a lot of damage to Bolivia, and yet it's still here. Especially the millennials now think he's such a great thinker, such guerrilla leader, and so forth. And they don't like the story I just told you about Carlos Santana. They don't want to know the truth. They want to preserve this image. Che Guevara has always been like that. The main battle of the revolution was near my hometown, was in Santa Clara. And really, even though Che Guevara was there and he had a column of 26th of July men with him, and by the way, this is also in my book, Cuban Revolution, the main group there were members of the Cuban Revolutionary Directorate, led by Cubela, which is in my book. Cubela actually was wounded, and yet, again, the media, both in Cuba and in this country, gave all the credit to Che Guevara and the 26th of July movement.
Now, do you believe that was on purpose? That the U.S. media
I
did?
really believe. Well, Fidel Castro and was such a charismatic leader, it's hard to tell whether it was just he seduced the media or whether the media already could tell this guy was leftist and ideologically the media has been progressive for many, many decades, or whether this just happened by chance. There are too many coincidences. I believe that because of his charisma and because of the association he kept with many left-wing people, including, like I said, Raúl Castro was known to be a communist. In fact, he was already involved with the KGB. He had traveled to the Soviet Union. Fidel Castro sent his brother on a tour of the communist countries just before the triumph of the revolution. And he was already a communist and may have been already, joined as an informant for the KGB, was a KGB agent. So it's hard to believe that our country and our media will do such a thing, but that is exactly what happened.
What do you think about people like Michael Moore, who says, we have Cuba all wrong, and we have the Castros all wrong. They're not bad. The communist regime in Cuba isn't that bad. Or the people who say about the communist regime in Venezuela. What do you think about those?
I can tell you that if it was a good white, between 40,000 to 100,000 people have been killed by the communist country of Cuba. Before the revolution, Cuba was a very prosperous country. The infant mortality was low. The number of doctors was correct. Even the standard of living was comparable to many countries in Europe. And the communists took power, and all of a sudden, Cuba has become a third world nation. Buildings are crumbling. These are architectural masterpieces are crumbling. A country where fruits were in abundance. You could just walk through a path in the woods and there were mangoes and guayabas and every kind of fruit. And now nothing is available. A country that was so prosperous and where I call it a paradise, and has become now a disastrous nation. I think Michael Moore has done a disservice. His documentaries, Sicko, was a bunch of mendacity. That has been proven by other journalists, by the way. Yes, all kids have education. If you call indoctrination education, if they're indoctrinated to be young communists, you got free health care. Well, yeah, you can go and see a doctor, but the doctor can do nothing for you. There are no medications. Professors and doctors prefer to go and work in the tourist industry. You will have a taxi driver in Cuba today. You talk to him, and he will most likely be somebody who has a PhD or an MD degree, and yes, he prefers to drive a taxi or serve in the tourist industry, because that way they can get dollars from tourists, or they can get money from the euros from Europeans. But they cannot even practice the profession because there is nothing. There are too many. When you have a central plan economy, nothing works, and that is what's happening under the tyranny of communism. And all you have to do is speak to anybody who's been to Cuba, or look at documentaries. Even the PBC has that documentary. It shows the misery of the Cuban people.
Yeah,
and that was in a country that had the standard of living of a European country before the revolution.
Yeah, someone in one of our chat rooms here is saying that they believe that Michael Moore is a communist.
He probably is.
Yeah.
He probably is. But I tell you, he has something right. He did before the election of Donald Trump, he told the Democrats that they better get their stuff together because this man attracts the people and the people connect with him. He doesn't try to hide his wealth. He is transparent, and people like him, and there is a good chance that you will lose the election. And I was one of those that always told my wife and my friends, Donald Trump is going to win. Michael Moore's got this correct. He is going to win, and he won. And we must win again in 2020, or we will see this country become another Cuba. And Venezuela is another disaster. Another disaster. Here's a country that's got plenty of oil, and yet people, they have nothing to eat. It's turning to another a country as bad as Haiti.
Yeah, I was debating.
Again, Venezuela was a prosperous country too before Hugo Chavez came into being.
Yeah, I was talking to someone about Venezuela, and they're like, "Oh, it's not as bad as people make it out to be." And my answer was, they're eating animals. I mean, eating zoo animals. So
the women are cutting their hair and selling the hair for wigs. That's how bad it is. People have nothing to eat. The women are becoming prostitutes to try to make a living. It's a complete disaster. A complete disaster.
Okay. Moving on for that, because I think you kind of answered it. Well, my next question was, if you wrote in your second book, you wrote about the 5 things that a totalitarian regime needs to get power and to hold power, and that is what I'm about to put up on screen. The book it is, but I can't find it. Okay, here it is.
Yes.
America Guns Freedom. You can look at it on the pictures up on the screen here. And I asked you in an interview I did if you saw some of that stuff coming to fruition in the United States, and you said you did.
Yes, I've seen those ingredients of what I call the hallmarks of tyranny, which I think is what you want to ask me.
Yeah, the hallmarks of tyranny.
Yes, I have seen much of it already coming up. And again, I will stress that if the Republicans lose the election in 2020, with the social democrats openly calling themselves socialists, and social democracy is another really a synonym for socialists, and the Democrat Party have become a party of the socialists, and we have the squad of the so-called squad, Omar and Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez and them, and they are basically leading the Democratic Party. And if they win, we will absolutely see the hallmarks of tyranny. We have seen the shades of it, and we will see the full color of it. Starting with, the standing army. Our founding fathers did not like standing armies. They were a part of tyranny. Well, we saw what happened with the ATF at the time of the Bill Clinton administration and Janet Reno. We saw what a rogue police force can do, federal police force, as the ATF did in Waco, where women and children were incinerated and killed for purported illegal acts, which were false. Actually, some of them were related to gun control. But anyway, we can see what can happen. It happened during Bill Clinton, and we can imagine if this much more radical Democrats take power, what could happen with the federal police and surveillance and wiretapping and the beginning of a police state. And that's number one. Let me mention some of the others. The control of education. The government schools that we see today, children have been taught to political correctness instead of the basics. I remember when Obama was first became president, they were singing songs in the government schools for Obama.
Yeah, it was kind of
We
scary.
can imagine what would happen with education as it happened in Cuba. One of the first things that Fidel Castro did in Cuba was to close private schools, and of course, it was all government indoctrination schools. We can see the same thing happening here. I can see public schools being ending. I can see homeschooling being forbidden.
They're already trying to do that.
All the children having to go to public schools. Excuse me?
They're trying to. A lot of Democrats are really against homeschooling, and some of them want to ban it.
Exactly. Another one, control of the media. Well, we see today the attacks on Donald Trump. They have been unprecedented. That a sitting president will be attacked like he has been attacked by the media. In fact, the media has become an arm of the Democrat Party. Instead of being a guardian of freedom and liberty, he has become an arm of the Democrat Party, a lapdog of the progressive movement, of the Social Democrats, and they are doing it out of their own volition. So you can imagine what would happen if the Democrats win. There will be, well, right now the media is a disloyal opposition, really, is what I call it, a disloyal opposition. They will become a de facto arm of the state. Another of the hallmarks of tyranny, of course, is what we're discussing today, and that's gun control, and we'll come back to that. I guess I should mention the second, and that is an ID card, national ID card. The way that the technology has advanced, I can see a national ID card becoming a tracking device for citizens. I'm not talking about illegal aliens that are here illegally, and they're breaking the law to begin with. I'm talking about citizens, American citizens, being tracked and under surveillance under a police state. And a national ID card with facial recognition, retinal topography, fingerprinting is an instrument of tyranny. Now, returning to gun control, there's a lot of talk about universal background checks and so forth. I think that has become an excuse for prolonging the background examination. In other words, allowing these background checks to go on and on and on, and deny citizens the right to keep a bear arms. And it's a prelude to registration. And we go back to Cuba. That when before the revolution, citizens could have arms. There was civilian ownership of guns, but they were registered. When Fidel Castro took over, the first thing he said is to order his militia, what a name, the militia, which were government thugs, communists, of course, and his army, to go through the registry and then confiscate firearms. So registration is a prelude to banning and confiscation. And I think that universal background checks, the way the Democrats want to do it, is nothing but a way to deny, delay, and register.
Yeah, I definitely see. Well, they're being honest about it now, at least, right? Like,
yeah.
Like Beto at work saying, "Yeah, hell yes, we're coming for your AR-15. We're gonna give you $350 to buy them back," which is ridiculous. But it's ridiculous and it is scary. Getting into gun control, you stood up and testified in front of Congress, which was a brave thing to do, about the bias and the CDC when it came to guns. Was that a hard decision for you to make, to stand up and testify?
No, it was not a hard decision at all. And I should say that I was one of four. I was there with Don B. Cates, with Timothy Wheeler, and with Dr. Waters. So there were four of us, and yes, we testified, and it was a great opportunity because as I had been editor of the Journal of the Medical Association of Georgia, which is part of organized medicine under the umbrella of the AMA, I saw firsthand that what was published in the medical journals about gun research was junk science. It was preordained to always conclude that quote, easy gun availability it leads to violence, that gun violence is a public health issue, an epidemic, and if you don't conclude with those remarks, you will not be published. And as editor, I refused to go along with that. I felt that we needed to publish both sides of the debate, and that got me into trouble. And when I was testifying in Congress, I was able to bring all this up, as well as to examine very carefully the studies that have been propounded by the CDC at the time, and they were result-oriented, they had preordained conclusions, they were politicized, and they were not based on science, but in politics. And it was because of that I'm proud that I was one of the four who testified, and because of that, I testified in the spring, and in the summer, Congress passed the restrictions upon the CDC that are still in place today after, 23 years. And those restrictions consist that the CDC and the public health researchers cannot promulgate gun control. The media has made it that, the Congress has forbidden the CDC from doing research in guns or this, in violence, and that is a lie. It's mendacity. What was restricted was the conducting and publishing pseudo-research that really was gun control propaganda. That was number one. And number two, forbidding the public health establishment from using taxpayer money, in other words, public money, for lobbying efforts. And, it's amazing. Here it is, the people are being taxed for research, and this money we show in Congress, and in my book I have also published this in America, Guns and Freedom, how this money was used for pamphlets, for boycotts, for political activity that was completely not related at all to scientific research, that was propaganda, and they were forbidden from doing this. And I'm proud that I contributed to that, to a law that still holds today. And, one of the targets or one of the goals of the Democrats today is to reinstitute money and begin funding, quote, gun research, which is really nothing but giving the CDC and the public health establishment, which is more than the CDC. There are schools of public health throughout the United States, and they want to give money, taxpayers' money, to all of these public schools and the CDC so that they can start conducting propaganda for gun control, because that's what it is. This is not based on any science. This is pseudo-science, or what I call junk science, and that was proved to the satisfaction of Congress, and they wisely acted upon that. Sometimes we criticize the Republicans, and I hear people, that they should stand for this and that, and that they don't do it. Well, sometimes they do, and in this case, they did. Just like they also, in 2012, they refused to reenact the assault weapons ban. And assault weapons I put in apostrophes because we can discuss that. There is no such thing as an assault weapon, as you know. So, yes, thank you for bringing that up. I'm very proud of my testimony.
We all thank you so much. Just want to get to a couple of the comments. Scott Hughes says that his AR is not for sale. Brandon Williams said, when the government wants to take your guns, they are planning on doing stuff to them doing stuff to you that you would probably shoot them for.
Well, I can tell you, if you look at the history of the 20th century, which was a very bloody century, you will find that 100 million people were killed, not in wars. I'm not talking about World War I or World War II. I'm talking about 100 million people were killed by their own governments. And they were all governments of the left.
Yeah, look at...
beginning with Nazi Germany to the USSR, Cambodia, and Red China. They were all leftist, collectivist states. Now, you will say, well, Nazi Germany, that's a right-wing. Right-wing, nothing. I have written about the political spectrum. When the individual is supreme, that's when you have a government of the right, which the culmination of that is anarchy or no government. To the other extreme is too much government power over the individual, and they are all collectivist states. Nazi Germany stands for National Socialist Workers' Party. National Socialist Workers' Party is a left-wing government. They're all tyrannical governments, and before they were able to kill so many of their own people, those people were disarmed. Genocide also took place after the people had been disarmed. And governments that do not trust the people with firearms tend to be tyrannical and a threat to humanity, really.
Yeah, look at what Nazi Germany, they disarmed their people and killed 6 million. Stalin disarmed his people and killed 50 million. Then you have Mao that disarmed his people and killed anywhere between 60 and 100 million, depending on what estimate you want to buy into.
Exactly. And they call it a great leap forward and the Cultural Revolution. What a euphemism for genocide and killing of their own people. And this is what, they will deny this, but this is the direction in which the Democratic Party is going, toward the left. They are not embarrassed anymore to call themselves social democrat and socialist. And I hope the American people awaken. The United States of America has been a beacon of hope and prosperity for the entire world. And one of the reasons is because we kept our firearms. I hear all this stuff, and again, I go into this in my book, America, Guns, and Freedom, about many people, even in this country, who have an admiration of the social democracies of Europe. And the reality is that the social democracies of Europe have had the welfare state that they have because they were protected by the United States of America. They were able to spend money in their welfare programs while we provided the defense. It was American boys who died saving Europe against the Nazis. We liberated France. We liberated Western Europe. And we did not take 1 inch of territory. This is the goodness of America. And consider this. After World War II, we protected the pusillanimous Europeans from the Soviet threat. If it wasn't for the American deterrent, those Soviet tanks that would have gone right over Europe, and they would have been unstoppable. Instead of having a freer society today, Europe will be a communist continent. And it was because the United States of America. Now, I discuss in my book why Americans are the way they are and how Americans have this spirit. Here in the South, we like to go hunting. We spend a lot of time in the woods. We are aware of firearms. We know how to use firearms. And that provides a basis. so that when we have to go to war to protect ourselves and our allies, we already have a background, for example, that the Europeans don't have.
Yeah.
And I explained that in my book.
Yeah. A couple of people are asking where they can get your book at. The America Guns and Freedom is coming out on October 1st. It's available for pre-order right now, correct? Like Amazon and stuff?
Yes, it is available for pre-order on Amazon. And probably, I just got a notice that they have reduced the price. Right now, I don't know how long that will last, but it's been reduced almost 20% with free shipping if you order right now from Amazon.
It's a great book. I got an advanced copy of it, and I want to thank you so much about it. One of the things I like about your book is that everything in it is sourced. It's not conjecture or emotion. It is hard facts. And you back that up by saying, this is where I got it from.
That's right. And another thing I like is the illustrations. I spend a lot of time to get good illustrations, and the graphs are magnificent. Guy Smith helped me with some of those graphs, and I'm very proud of the whole book, as you can imagine. And I think it reads well, and I highly recommend it.
I mean, there's a lot of information in there, but I blew through it. And I blew through your second book like in 2 days. Just because it was so captivating. Or actually, it was your first book. Yeah, Brandon, Brandon is asking again. October 1st, pre-order now. It's on sale, I guess, on Amazon. So you can just search American Guns and Freedom, or you can search his name, which is up on the screen. It's an awesome book. It like I said, I read a review of it in an interview I did with you for AmmoLand, and I wrote that if you want to debate liberals, this is the perfect book to get. Because I mean, every argument that they have is defeated in your book.
Yes, I have been thinking about this subject for many years, from 1991, when I became involved in organized medicine. And the story, of course, I've seen another book, but I think that that book needed to be written. We don't need to be ashamed that the Europeans call America's gun culture. Well, America's gun culture is what freed you from the Nazis and kept you free during the Cold War against the Soviet bear. And so I'm very proud of America, my adoptive country, and I don't want it to go the way of Cuba and Venezuela. Perhaps we can have another talk sometimes more about Cuba, because I think you enjoy that guerrilla interesting history of Cuba, which is a fascinating history for Latin America.
Yeah, I've done a lot of research on Cuba and the whole Latin America thing. I didn't want to concentrate totally all on that tonight, because you have a new book coming out. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that as well. One thing I do notice is you are very proud to be an American. Do you think seeing what communism was in your original country of Cuba helped you appreciate what we have here in America?
Absolutely. When I was, I guess, about 10 years old, I admired the revolutionaries. I grew up in a revolutionary family. Thank goodness that we were able to see that we have been betrayed in our revolution in Cuba. So when we came to especially for me, let me just speak for myself, when I arrived to this country, I had been indoctrinated about so many lies about what this country was supposed to be, so horrible or so unjust. And then as soon as I entered the United States, it took me, it's another adventure for a 13-year-old. It took 3 months to make it to the United States, because we went south of Cuba. We went to several Caribbean islands before we made it to the United States. But when we arrived here, I thank God that I have arrived here, and then realized that I have been lied by the communists about what this country really represented. And I was very proud when I became a citizen 5 years later after that.
Yeah, I mean, and you did it the right way. You applied for asylum and everything else.
Absolutely. When I entered this country, I was already a resident of the United States. We did everything legally. The rule of law is essential for a republic, and we're still a republic. I keep on saying this. I think we're going to win in 2020. I think we're going to win big. But if I am wrong and we lose, then we will no longer have a republic. And Benjamin Franklin's admonition would have been to no avail. We would have lost our republic, and we will enter socialist tyranny.
Yeah. What do you think of the candidates? I got a kind of sneaking feeling what you feel about the candidates, but the open socialist candidates like the Bernie Sanders and
Uh,
those type.
Bernie Sanders. I mean, I'll tell you one thing about Bernie Sanders. I think he was the only one that for years had been admitting to being a socialist, and I give him credit for that. But other than that, he's wrong about so many things, and his ignorance is incredible. When the errors that he has made about Latin America and other countries about what socialism entails is incredible. I hope the voters will listen to really what he's saying. I think the Democrats want to buy their vote, promising everything under the sun. And in fact, if they do go with this climate change and the green program that they want to implement, especially Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, they will bankrupt this country anyway. They
Yeah.
will People will not be able to go to college like they have promised. They will bankrupt this country.
Um,
Uh,
Matt Cowboy wants to know how hard was the legalization process when you came to the United States as a
how?
refugee?
Okay, for we Cubans had an advantage. In 1968, Lyndon Johnson and Congress. At that time, the Democrats were still Democrats. Today, they're socialists. But back then, they were Democrats, and they recognized the threat of communism, and they also recognized the attachment and the close relationship that Cuba has had with the United States. And they passed an act making it easier for us to become residents of the United States and to allow us as refugees to have an easier path than other nationalities. Uh, but I think legally becoming a citizen is about the path. I think is correct. The problem is the illegal people entering this country, and by entering illegally, they're already breaking the law. See, and I think the Democrats want to take advantage of this because they think that they're going to add all these people to the voting rolls, and that's why they don't want to stem the tide. And something has to be done. I was a refugee once, but I came legally, like you stated, and I recognize the fact that we have to do something about immigration. And the way that we should go about it is we need to tell the country deciding the people that we need to enter this country. And the people that we need, we allow those people. Now, otherwise, we need to somewhat restrict immigration because people are not being assimilated. When my father and I entered this country, one of the things my dad told me is now you're in the United States. Yes, we don't turn our back on Cuba, but we're now going to be Americans. And the Democrats don't want that. They want to balkanize this country, divide and conquer. And instead of uniting people, they are breaking them down into pressure groups, and that is wrong.
Yeah, I mean it's ridiculous, and I do agree with you. I do think they're doing it to like pad the rolls and to add more people on their side, because
Oh, absolutely.
when you can't win on arguments, you have to import people who agree with you. It seems like Cubans tend to be more conservative than than
You're absolutely right. We're the most conservative group in America, including white males, incidentally. We Cuban Americans, we used to vote 90% Republicans. It's now about 75%. And if it wasn't for the Cuban American vote, we would have lost Florida.
yeah.
And that is because we have lived under communism. We have seen exactly what socialism can do, how can it can bankrupt the country, how it can divide the people instead of unite them, and turning a prosperous country into a third world nation is what happened to Cuba, is what has happened to Venezuela, and it will happen to this country if we don't do the right thing. And we are aware of it, we live through it, and I think that's why we're so conservative. We love this country. My mother is very proud to be an American, and she was a revolutionary. I mean, she was a tough lady. It's in the book.
Yeah.
But she is very Republican. She's very conservative. She went to see Donald Trump in Orlando when he was there, and she takes credit for mobilizing hundreds of people to vote for Trump in Miami. So yes, we are conservative.
I'll tell her we said thank you for keeping Hillary Clinton out of office.
That's right. That is right.
Yeah. Getting back to the guns thing, how do we get the bias, the anti-gun bias, out of the medical community?
I think we need to shame them because it's obvious that their research is not scientific, it's not objective, it's politicized pseudoscience with preordained results. But this is very difficult to do because they own the medical journals, and if you don't conclude with the same canard that easy gun availability leads to crime and that gun ownership leads to death. In fact, that is a quote. We're going to make a systematic approach that firearm ownership causes death. That was a public health official said that. Another public health official said guns are viruses that need to be eradicated. I mean, these are people that are supposedly are objective researchers in public health and medicine, and they are abandoning science for politics. And unfortunately, while I was editor of the journal, I was the only editor that allowed both sides of the debate to be presented, and I caught a lot of flack for that. I was attacked by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. I was viciously attacked, and all I was doing was providing both sides of the gun control debate. I felt that public health was not the only avenue, that we needed to look at the sociological and the criminologic literature. I published research by Dr. Edgar Suter that nobody else would publish, and it was outstanding research. Why? Because the bias and the preordained results that they want, and you don't get published. I founded another medical journal, and that is still used by a medical society, and I'm now an associate editor-in-chief of an international journal, and we do what we can. We're probably the only international journal that has published articles on both sides of this issue, including mass shootings and gun control and so forth. Even though our journal is a neuroscience and journal for neurosurgeons all over the world, but nobody else in the medical literature will publish anything describing the beneficial aspects of gun ownership. None other, and that's got in. And one of the ways to end it is we need to close the spigot of money that is going to public health. We need to close the money flow that is going for those kind of research. The AMA, as I mentioned in an interview that I have with you, has a monopoly of CPT code books that every doctor, every laboratory, every healthcare provider has to own to be able to bill for medical charges for therapeutic procedures. And they have a complete monopoly on this. Therefore, what that means is they don't even need members anymore. At one time, the AMA had a 75 to 80% membership of all the doctors in the United States. Now it's dropped to about 15%. 15% of the doctors belong to the AMA. They have dropped because the AMA has become a politicized, a very biased, progressive organization that no longer represents the doctors. So therefore, even if the doctors are upset about what they're publishing, the AMA can do whatever it wants because he has a monopoly on the code books, and that is a money-making machine that is approved by the government to be able to bill for procedures. Like I mentioned, all healthcare providers have to use those books to be able to comply with the government mandates in medicine. And the AMA owns a monopoly of this, so they don't need membership. Doctors can complain as much as they want to. They don't need the doctors. Most of the doctors in the AMA now are public health people that are employed, many of them employed by the government. So it's a very difficult problem to solve, and the only way that it's going to be solved is doing what Congress did when we testified in 1996, and that is cut the money supply going on scientific research, for propaganda, for social engineering projects. That money has got to be cut down. And I hope that members of Congress are listening to this and get tough on defunding some of the projects that are not needed, going to public health. And the monopoly that the AMA has on this CPT codes, I wish it could be broken. It was a government-mandated, supported monopoly, and if the government mandated at one time, it can also break it up.
Okay, one more question for you. I know we're a little bit over an hour because this conversation has been freaking fantastic. We could probably go for hours and hours. But one of the people in one of the chat rooms that we're in, because we're broadcasting in like a bunch of different locations. I'm trying to push everyone to Facebook, by the way. John Crump too, or you can just go to crumpy.com/show. That's what I want everyone to kind of merge to, because trying to track like 10 different chat rooms is kind of hard. But that's why I created that channel, just for that. But one of the people in the chat room, Cowboy, we call him, he wants to know how do we challenge the false studies when they're accepted as reality by so many people?
Well, thankfully, there is an organization of doctors called Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership, and I am a member of it. Dr. Robert Young, a very distinguished psychiatrist, is the editor of the publications. Dr. Timothy Wheeler, who testified with me, is the founder of the organization, and they are all very much involved, and we are, every chance that we get to review those studies, we have been criticizing them, and our membership is increasing. And if you look on Facebook, Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership, you will see how busy that Facebook page is.
But Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership.
Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership. And we are doing what we can to taking apart. I've taken many of those studies and I have published critiques through the organization. And of course, I have a whole section in my book showing the errors in some of those studies.
Yeah, Cowboy, as we call him, he's been fighting battle for against some anti-gunners. He's on a council, and they did basically been or task force, and they've been debating gun violence, and they keep on pulling out all these false studies, and they're easily disprovable, but when he sees them, he doesn't know what they're gonna pull up. Like, they're pulling numbers out of the air. So I think that's what he was kind of. So I think he's gonna look into that and just pull out some of the studies so he can hit back at them, because they're using a lot of studies from the medical establishment that, if you read the studies, one of the things I noticed about a lot of the studies, because I have to read a lot of the studies, is they'll title it something like "guns are bad" or something like that. But if you read the studies, the study and the title are opposite. The results.
Exactly. Do you know why that is? Because they want to get published, and they're supposed to have a peer review to make sure those studies are proper, that they're scientific, that they pass scrutiny. But obviously, the peer review system has failed, and what they're doing is trying to say what the editors of the medical journals, all who are progressive, and not ideologically committed to toe the line of the AMA and the public health establishment. So the title reflects that, so they get published. So that is the simple reason. And we have taken many of those studies, like I say, in Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership. I urge Cowboy and others who are interested in this to search through their website. They have a very, very busy Facebook page. But if you go to their website also, you will find that we have analyzed perhaps hundreds of studies and demolished them with. And like I say, in my book, I have several examples of that.
Yeah, you do. You do. I take it you're a fan of John Lott Jr.?
Yes, I think he's done a great service, and I mention him in my book, and I mention some of his studies.
Mm-hmm.
So I am also a fan of Gary Clegg, who I also cite in my book.
Cowboy's excited because you said his name.
Well, he deserved it. He asked some good questions.
Yeah, he is one of the most active people we have, because he's always asking all these questions. He should have his own interview show.
Well, yeah. I hope he gets my book, and let me know what he thinks.
I think he's pre-ordering. I think he already pre-ordered it tonight.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I think your book, for people like him who've actively engaging these people, America, Guns, and Freedom. If you read that book, that's going to help you out tons, because not only do you give a story of how you fought against these things, you also show the techniques that they use to do this.
That's right. That's exactly right. You have to analyze them and expose their fallacy. Like the canard of Kellerman. That a gun in the house is more likely to hurt and kill a family member than an intruder. Well, in 1986, he called it the 43 times fallacy. In 1993, he called it the 2.7 number, the 2.7 times more likely to injure or kill a family member than an intruder. Both numbers are erroneous. And I explain, for example, exactly why they're erroneous. And, of course, it's in my book. But we have to do that. And, again, I forgot to mention, that's another thing that happened during our testimony in 1996. And that is that the number one public health researcher Arthur Kellerman was defunded, specifically defunded from getting any more money from the CDC for any gun research because of how biased he was, the fact that he did not share his data with other researchers, and because we found so many errors.
Yeah,
and because it was gun control propaganda.
There's another guy named Adam Langford who is a anti-gun guy who releases all these research. But if you ever read any of those papers, they're not peer reviewed for one thing. And another thing is he never cites any sources. And yet, like people like the Brady campaign and Everytown, they cite him constantly. The guy hates me, by the way.
Well, it's on scientific work. If you don't have references, where those numbers come from? That's another trick they use. They don't provide the raw data of where the numbers come from because they cannot pass scrutiny. And by the way, you're talking about this gun control organization like Handgun Control Incorporated. George Sugarman was one of the leaders of that organization. He's the one that called assault weapons.
Yep.
Assault weapon being an erroneous term that doesn't exist. It's a political term invented by him to demonize certain firearms. And of course, the media is so either ignorant or mendacious that they sometimes use the term assault weapons and sometimes they say assault rifles. Assault rifles have been banned since 1934. They are fully automatic weapons that, in fact, I cannot recall any mass shooting in which an assault rifle was used. I'm not aware.
There have been two shootings with assault rifles in the last 50 years. One was illegally converted, and the other one was a cop who used a duty weapon. So yeah, I do a lot of research into that. Do you know why they chose assault weapon as the term?
Because it could be easily demonized.
In their leaked memos, they actually said it's close to assault rifle.
Is that right?
Yes.
And then so many erroneous things they say, and they are repeated as truthful things by the media. And again, you wonder, as you were asking me about the revolution, and you wonder, are they ignorant or are they doing this on purpose? Assault rifles are fully automatic rifles or weapons of war, and they are the purpose of them is to injure and wound the opponents. Actually, not to kill them, because it takes more effort in a war situation to take care of the wounded than it takes to people who are dead, soldiers who are. You have to take care of the wounded. And yet, the media, they are of course, they're using the terms interchangeably. But assault weapons were not designed to really kill, but to immobilize. But obviously, some people are going to be killed. But it's not like a hunting rifle, like a 30-06. We know what that can do, And another thing is, what they call assault weapons are just military-looking, weapons, but they are not fully automatic. You have to pull the trigger one at a time. They are semi-automatic, and the bullets are smaller. They're not as powerful as hunting rifles. And by the way that they describe this and they legislate these things, just about any weapon can be considered an assault weapon, including some shotguns. But I know we may have to leave that topic for another time.
Oh, I mean, there's just so much to dig into here. But yeah, it's funny how they do that. Yeah, 30-06 is definitely more powerful than a 5.56. Basically, what the military, you're right, they want to wound people, because what they consider is that if you kill someone, you take one person out. If you wound someone, you take 3 people out, because it's going to take 2 people to take care of that one person.
That's right.
That's why they want to wound people. One final question, and then we'll wrap up here, is have you noticed that everyone on the anti-gun side uses the same language? Military-style weapon, military-style gun, military-style this, or common sense gun, common sense. We're just looking for common sense law. It's like they almost read from the same playbook.
Exactly. It's unreasonable restrictions, huh? Another one. It's almost trying to euphemisms, because they're deceitful and they're dishonest and they want to use language. Again, if we read, George Orwell wrote a fantastic book, 1984, and one of the things he talks about is the power of language and thought control, and how you can manipulate language to get away with a lot of things and to diminish the vocabulary so that even certain thoughts will eventually be eradicated by manipulating language. And this is where this has come from. Even if they may not be aware, it's the totalitarian thought of the left.
Yeah. Mike Morris just joined one of the chat rooms. He actually supplies me with my ammo. Warrior Revolution ammo is some of the best ammo I've ever used. This is their 9mm I have in my hands here. They also have the 223. I have some 300 Blackout out there. They're great. So go check them out at warriorsrevolution.com. One other thing. Have you ever shot a machine gun?
Yes.
Oh, you have? Okay.
I have an M16 from a friend of mine. I don't have any assault rifles or automatic weapons. My daughter, when she was in law school, was in Virginia, was taken to a field and with other attorneys, and they shot automatic weapons. She was so excited that I included her picture in my book.
Yeah, I saw that. When you come out, because you're going to be at the Gunathon, I'm going to arrange for you to shoot a fully automatic briefcase.
Oh, fantastic.
It's a briefcase that's actually a machine gun.
Okay.
It's kind of crazy good. You'll like it. But you're going to be at the Gunathon, and you're going to be speaking at the Gunathon. That's in Northern Virginia on April 25th. It's going to be a great time, and I think that people there are going to love your message, because your message is truthful. It's right on. You know the techniques that the other side uses, and you can help people understand how they're going to come at us and how to defend against erroneous information. So I want to thank you for agreeing to come out for that. That's to raise money for GOA, which I am a Virginia State Director on. I also write for Ammoland.com. Before I let you get out of here, do you want to plug anything besides your books? Your books are going to be available. They're available on Amazon. America Guns and Freedom is available for pre-sale on Amazon. Anything else you want to plug or let us know about?
Well, and the other book that you mentioned, because we spent time on Cuba and the Revolution, and there are also gun control lessons there. That other book is Cuba and Revolution, Escape from a Lost Paradise, and you can also get that from Amazon. And they have some used copies, and they go fairly cheap. So if you like that story as well, the involvement of my family in the Revolution, in the underground, and my escape, and so forth. You may want to read that book as well.
I'm holding it up right now. It might be a little bit, it looks like pixelated because I have a green screen in the cover of the book screen, but I am holding it up. People can see it. It's a good book. I like American Guns and Freedom a lot, especially from like, what I do. I mean, all day I debate gun stuff all day, so that helps me out there. But Cuban Revolution, that is an adventure story. It's a nonfiction adventure story, so that's gonna captivate people and bring them in. So yeah, so get this book now, because I guarantee you would finish Cuban Revolution, Escape from a Lost Paradise, before America Guns and Freedom even comes out.
Well, I'm very glad that you like the books, and I really had a good time talking with you, and
Yeah,
I'm glad you had me on your show.
yeah. Everyone is saying thank you for coming on. I see. Thank you, Doc. Then thank you, Dr. Miguel. Thank you, Dr. Faria. So, yep. Everyone's thanking you.
Well, I had a tremendous, terrific time. Thank you very much to all of you for listening to this. And thank you, John, for having me on your excellent show.
Oh, anytime. And thank you for the books.
Thank you.
All right, bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right, that was Dr. Miguel Faria. Check out his books. They're awesome books. I cannot recommend them enough. He is going to be talking at the Gunathon, which is another cool event right there. You can see it on the screen, gunathon.com. Remember my thing, $50. Once I reach $750, a single mom out there is not only going to get a gun, but she's probably a Glock 19, but we'll go to the gun store, let her try out some, or whatever. But then we're going to arrange to get her some training to actually be able to learn how to use that gun and to defend herself, and get her a concealed carry permit. And that's what that money's going to go for. My Patreon money basically goes back to my Second Amendment activities. Everything that I do on Patreon, that money just goes back into the Second Amendment activities. I'm going to start publicizing that more, because I haven't really been publicizing what I do with my Patreon money. I got 3 Patreons now, so hopefully I'll get a little bit more. But that's what everything is going through. And if you want to join the GOA, I got a great deal for you. You can join the GOA and get $10 off. Usually it's $25 a year, but you can join it for $15 on us, Black Swan Media. And all you have to do is go to gunowners.org/black-swan-media and fill out that link, and will get a free, not a free membership, a $15 membership. But if you want a free membership, head over to youtube.com/C as in cat or crump /John Crump 2, all one word. And everyone who joins, I'm giving away 1 membership to my subscribers a month. A free year's membership to GOA that I'm paying for a subscriber a month. Chosen at random, using a random number generator. We gave away one last month, and we're going to give away another this month. And also, the pre-orders for the Gunathon is up. Gunathon.com. Go there. Sign up. Buy your tickets. Come see some awesome speakers and YouTubers. And we have a huge announcement that I'm probably going to make right before October 1st. Stay tuned. It's a massive guest. We have some big guests. We even have a damn Power Ranger coming to it. So how can you not love the Gunathon when you have the Green Ranger, Jason David Frank there? And Iraq Vet 888, Eric from Iraq Vet 888, Hank Strange, American Gun Chick, John Patton from the Gun Collective is going to be speaking. We have Kevin Dixie going to be there, Maj Torre, Philip Van Cleve, Eric Pratt, tons and tons of people. And for all you 3%ers out there, or 3-uppers, you can look for Aaron Proctor, who's going to be speaking from 3 Up VA. It's going to be an exciting time. I cannot wait. We're going to have a lot of fun, and we'll see you there. Well, this is it for this week. Next week, I'm not going to tell you who is going to be there. Yes, Philip Van Cleve from the VCDL is going to be speaking. The VCDL is going to be there because they're our friends at Gun Owners of America. We have a very, very tight relationship with the VCDL, especially me, since I'm like the Virginia director. But yeah, so this is cool. So Aaron Proctor from 3 Up, Philip Van Cleve from the VCDL, Maj Toure, Black Guns Matter, John Patton, freaking out. Let me just pull up the list here. Miguel Faria here. Oh, Reed Hendricks from Valor Ranch as well is going to be there. We have a lot of different people here. I'm pulling it up on my... Actually, you know what? I can do this. Let me just do this. Hold on. All right. So let me just do this. Gunathon.org. Check out this, man. This is awesome. Let me just bring down my little Gunathon. Look at this here. Special guest. Let's go to special guest. Look at this. Eric Pratt, GOA. Hey, look at that guy. Look at this jerky guy. It's me. Maj Toure, Black Guns Matter. Philip Van Cleve, VCDL president. John Patton, the Gun Collective. Cheryl Todd, Gun Freedom Radio. Kevin Dixie, Knock Firearms. Aaron Proctor, 3 Up VA. Reed Hendricks, Valor Ranch. Jason David Frank, a Power Ranger, the Green Ranger, and also a White Ranger. Eric Blanford, our IV8888, the Gun Doctor from Gun Doctor TV. Brickle Clark, American Gun Chick. Jared Yanis from Guns and Gadgets. Hank Strange from the Hank Strange Show. And the list keeps on going on. OBNX S1 YouTube. Tyven, sorry. Sorry, Tyven. Tyven from the Tyven Show. Silverback from Gorillas and Guns. Trill Toya. Let me tell you one thing about Trill Toya. Trill Toya engaged. She was at a nightclub on New Year's Eve. And some dude started lighting the place up with AK-47. Trill Toya, who is a military vet, pulled her firearm, her pistol, and took down the shooter that was shooting up the club with an AK-47. So she saved a lot of lives that night, and you know what? You don't hear about that. Why? Because a good guy, or in this case, a good girl, with a gun, shot a bad guy with a AK-47. Abby Lynn from Weaponized Wonderness. You got the Patriot News Podcast, Trenchwork Chronicles, Fireside Chats, this show, the Concealed Carry Podcast, Not Your Average Gun Girls Podcast, and the Firearms Trainer Podcast. And we're going to be announcing probably about 3 more podcasts in the next week or so, but just stay tuned. But you guys really, really have to go to this. I mean, it's going to be awesome. And if you have any questions, just hit us up, man. Hit us up. It's going to be awesome. We got like 15 food trucks coming. It's crazy. It's going to be crazy big. All right. Well, guess what? That is it. I guess I should play the outro, and we can get out of here.